colors. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Bonce. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Public Safety here at DCJS. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Public Safety Symposium this year. This week, you'll hear from keynote speakers and have the opportunity to participate in several of our more than 100 breakout sessions. Most of the sessions will focus on leveraging evidence-based policing to reduce persistent violence within our communities, including gun violence and domestic violence. As a retired Deputy Chief of Police from the City of Kingston Police Department for over 25 years, I know all too well that these pressing issues have a profound impact on the well-being of our communities. And it's imperative that we employ the latest data-driven, evidence-informed strategies to address them effectively in partnership with the community. As we gather here today, we recognize the critical importance of evidence-based policing in shaping a safer, more equitable future for us all. By leveraging research, data, and best practices, we can develop effective interventions to reduce violence while also building stronger relationships with the communities we serve. Beyond the valuable insights and knowledge we'll gain from the speakers and training sessions this week, I encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to network with your peers from across the state. Building relationships with fellow professionals can lead to significant collaborations, the sharing of key resources, and a collective approach to addressing complex public safety issues. It is our hope that this annual symposium will grow and serve as a platform for law enforcement professionals, researchers, policymakers, and community leaders to discuss best practices, share knowledge, and explore emerging trends in the justice and safety field. Together, we will cover critical topics such as leadership and professional development, officer and staff wellness, community and youth engagement, crime analysis, procedural justice, criminal justice reform, and many others. By fostering collaboration and innovation, not only through this symposium, but all we do at DCJS, I know that we can create a more effective, efficient, and equitable justice system that serves the needs of all New Yorkers. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to a productive and informative symposium. At this time, I would like to introduce Commissioner Rossana Rosado. For those of you that may not know Commissioner Rosado, she leads the agency and is the third woman, second person of color, and first Latina to do so since DCJS was created in 1972. Prior to becoming commissioner in 2021, she served as New York State's Secretary of State for nearly 6 years. As secretary, she advanced a wide array of community revitalization and reentry efforts. Her public service followed a more than 30-year career in the media industry as an executive award-winning producer. Most notably, she served as the first female CEO, editor, and publisher of El Diario La Prensa. I tried to get it right, Commissioner. It's the oldest and largest Spanish-language newspaper in the country. On a personal note, it is clear to everyone that works with the Commissioner that her time here at DCJS is a culmination of her personal and professional passions. She is a true champion for justice and is always encouraging the people who work at DCJS to find new ways to help the agencies, organizations, and people who are most in need. It is now my distinct honor to pass the program to Commissioner Rosado. Thank you.
Very well done.
Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I will remind you that it's the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month, so hug a Latino when you see them. Thank you, Mike, for the warm welcome and for all that you do at DCJS. As Mike shared, I come to this work from the lens of a journalist. Over the course of 3 decades, I heard and shared stories of society's most vulnerable, and those experiences shaped my life. They inspired me to earn a master's degree from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. That usually gets an applause. Thank you. It also moved me to serve as chair of the then Council on Community Reentry and Reintegration, which worked to remove barriers for people returning home from prison. All along, what I did not know was that my dream job was waiting for me here at DCJS. Why is it a dream job? When you get up and you want to do what you're paid to do because you have a unique opportunity to fix things and to call them out. And then you have the resources to put behind the solutions. That's a dream job for me. What we most need now is the time to tell the stories. Now, after nearly 3 years as commissioner, it has been a blessing to both work with such a dedicated and talented team. And talk about talent. Let's get an applause for Annette Harris on that, on the national anthem. And also to get to know many of you. I've come to you, you've come to me. You are our local partners who are doing the vital work on the ground. Through your work, you are truly making communities safer and stronger. As I prepared for my first budget testimony in late 2021, I shared with the state legislature that DCJS had continued to evolve with the justice system and gain valuable experience working with all the stakeholders. I said, we know where the system has been, where it is now in a moment of change, and we have the vision to seize this moment and to help guide it forward. To me, those words ring truer now, more now than ever, and this annual symposium is a testament to it. The work of professionals at DCJS in partnership with state and local colleagues has advanced New York toward a more fair, equitable, and efficient justice system. New York continues to be among the safest states in the country while maintaining the lowest rate of incarceration, despite the crises and challenges of the past few years. As Governor Hochul, an unparalleled supporter of our work and leader on public safety, shared last week, we are seeing continued signs of progress in reducing violence and improving safety throughout most of New York. Shootings are down 28% through the end of last month in our 21 gift counties. That should get an applause. This represents 161 fewer people shot from the same time last year. And while it is good to look back at the year-to-year, I also want to reflect where we were just 3 years ago. In September of 2021, when I had no idea I would be here, DCJS reported that there were 840 shootings in GIV communities. And this last Monday, we reported that there were 417. So that means a 50% decline and a return to not only pre-pandemic lows, but historic ones. This is a life-saving and life-changing progress that you all made possible. So let me applaud you. This shooting data is the most current information we have, but it is also indicative of reported crime trending in the right direction. As we compile data for the first half of the year, we are seeing that statewide crime, both in New York City and beyond, is down roughly 6% from last year. This is a tangible and tremendous improvement, even though there is still more work to do. I want you to know that we are deeply grateful for your continued efforts in your communities. I also want you to know that DCJS is going to continue to deliver the tools, training, and technical assistance that you need. When we took our tour in the last few years, at every stop we discussed recruitment and retention challenges, pandemic disruptions, justice reform implementation, and growing needs among justice-involved individuals, all of which you will have a chance to hear about this week at the more than 100 breakout sessions. This outreach strengthened existing partnerships, fostered new ones, and guided our funding to prosecutors, public defenders, police probation, and community groups. In closing, I want to thank Governor Hochul for her outstanding leadership on public safety. I also want to recognize the exceptional DCJS team of more than 400 who make this work possible, bringing humanity and a holistic focus to justice and safety. Together we will continue to work hand in hand to keep New Yorkers safe and ensure a justice system that works for all. None of this is easy, but as our communities and the times change, we will be there. Thank you for being here with us this week. Take the time to meet each other and to tell your own stories. That's why we're keeping this room empty, for you to be able to do that. And now I will return the program to Johanna Sullivan from our Office for Public Safety. Thank you. This thing always stops. Thank you. I know when I need it most.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for those remarks and for your leadership. Good afternoon, everyone. As the Commissioner said, I'm Johanna Sullivan. I'm the Director of the Office of Public Safety at DCJS. First, I want to thank you all for being here. I know you're all very busy. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and being here with us for a few days to help learn together at this record-breaking symposium. The governor has committed $40 million to combat domestic violence through public safety interventions. DCJS is looking forward to launching a new initiative to help fund and support all of your efforts on this issue in the coming days. As you will note, we have an entire track dedicated to domestic violence and hope that you're able to utilize that information that you learn there to help enhance your practice. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Linda Phan, the Deputy Director of Policy, Communication, and Strategic Engagement at the Department of Justice's Office of Violence Against Women, to help us kick off our focus on domestic and intimate partner violence. Her participation is timely, considering that last week we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Violence Against Women Act, which provided groundbreaking protections and funding for domestic violence victims. Ms. Phan has dedicated her career to work on the issues of domestic violence and sexual assault. She has worked at the local advocacy level, as the head of a nonprofit, on statewide councils and initiatives, and now in her current position at the Office of Violence Against Women, she and other executives from the office oversee the more than $690 million, which is used to support services and justice responses for victims and survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sexual assault. Thank you very much for being here, Director Phan. I now turn it over to Director Phan.
Hello, good morning. Well, first of all, I want to express my sincere gratitude for having me here at this symposium, especially to Johanna and the commissioners. It's truly an honor to be here because I get to be in a space with dedicated individuals who have spent their careers and their lives doing this work and keeping our communities safe. And I just wanted to make a quick little adjustment in terms of my title. I'm actually Deputy Director of OVW. Rosie Hidalgo, who is our Director at OVW at the Department of Justice, she is also a force of nature, and one of the things she's really espoused in her leadership is making sure that we are continuously engaged with the field, with law enforcement, prosecutors, criminal justice partners, and then of course advocates and survivors to make sure that whatever we're doing at OVW and at the Department of Justice, that's in response to the needs on the ground. So I got to, last night, Johanna and I got to sit for a little bit and I learned a little bit more about the work that you're doing in the state. New York has really been at the forefront on how to address domestic violence and sexual assault. I understand you put together a model policy for trauma-informed policing and also looking at flexible financial assistance, right? When we're looking at the wide berth of needs that survivors come across. And so these are very, very innovative approaches. So I really want to commend you all for the work that you're doing on the ground, and then also the work that you're implementing and thinking about the future, because we know that when it comes to the issues of domestic violence and sexual assault, these needs and these merging practices and issues are always evolving. So please, I'd like to just kind of give you guys a hand in terms of what you have accomplished in the state. And as John had mentioned, I've spent my career in the field on domestic violence and sexual violence, a good 25 years there. And I've worked with law enforcement on the ground and victim service providers. The work that you do day in and day out is hard. It is hard because I'm very well aware you are put in extremely dangerous situations. Many jurisdictions are under-resourced. We don't have enough training out there. And as I mentioned earlier, survivors' needs are always evolving. So it really is, so again, I thank you for your service. I know that the symposium is really focused on broader public safety, but I'm very happy to hear that there is a track on domestic violence and sexual violence. So I'm going to spend most of my time, of course, talking about these issues and these crimes under what is covered under the Violence Against Women's Act. We know that intimate partner violence, when we're looking at overall violent crime, 15%, the national average is 15% of violent crime is tied to intimate partner violence. In many jurisdictions, that percentage is much, much higher, of course. I was recently in Virginia last month, and I was speaking to a police chief who said, hey, 70% of my cases that are coming through are tied to domestic violence. And so, Johanna mentioned the Violence Against Women's Act. So we did celebrate its anniversary this past Friday on September 13th. But we know, over the years, it has been transformative in terms of what federal resources we can put out there for jurisdictions and communities to address these issues. And over the years, we have really made some significant progress in making sure that gender-based violence is not merely a private matter, that it really is a societal issue that permeates every corner of our nation. According to the latest CDC stats, 41% of women and 26% of men have experienced some form of intimate partner violence, whether it's sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. And you all know that these are just not numbers. These are our brothers and sisters and parents and neighbors. And so we know that many of these lives are irrecoverably altered when they're impacted by these types of crimes. And so OVW, we were created, the Office on Violence Against Women, we were actually created in '94 under the Violence Against Women's Act, and our job is essentially to administer the grant funding that is authorized under that legislation. Additionally, under my team at OVW, we also try to implement the provisions, the protective provisions to support survivors and victims. This past Friday, we actually had just announced $690 million in federal funding. And most of our grants will be going out by the end of September, but I'm also aware that that number is really just a drop in the bucket. It's not enough. It is the highest level of funding for us to make sure that we are supporting criminal justice responses, ensuring that there's transitional housing out there, legal assistance, advocacy programs, and whatever services are needed to assist survivors. But again, even though it's a high number, it's still just a drop in the bucket when we're looking at the needs across the nation, not only all 50 states, the territories, and then of course many tribal nations as well. In the latest reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act, we did put out several new grant programs. I want to make sure that you are all aware of them. We have started to look at restorative justice and restorative practices. We know that for survivors, sometimes, many times, they are relying on the criminal justice system. Sometimes they might not be. And so we want to additionally open up pathways to justice and healing. And so we have put out funding for restorative practices. Additionally, there are new emerging threats when it comes to technology and cyber crimes. So we will be announcing soon the establishment of a National Resource Center on cyber crimes. And for many of you in this room, you may be interested in this. We also have grants that are supporting law enforcement in addressing cyber crimes when there's an intersection to gender-based violence. So We know there are a lot of deep fakes out there, the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. And of course, we know that abusers are very savvy in using technology to stalk or to further abuse or further harass their victims. And so we have put out grants to support law enforcement when it comes to these issues. And I encourage you, if you've not applied for any of our funding before, I encourage you to go to our website. We are the federal government. I'm not that creative. So whatever solicitations we have on our website right now, most of them are closed, but we will be re-releasing them between November to January. So our solicitations are there. These are grants that can go to local government, law enforcement, prosecutors, community-based organizations. And here's the kicker, guys. Sometimes we don't get enough applications. So I encourage you to take a look at them. And like I said, we're not very creative. So probably the solicitation you see there right now is going to be essentially released again. So as the policy director, one of my roles is to ensure what you are doing on the ground really gets back to the federal government, not just for OVW, but the entirety of the Department of Justice. And we also work with other agencies as well, whether it's HHS or HUD or the Department of Homeland Security. And, we really look at what is it, again, how can we make our federal government more responsive to survivors? In our work at OVW, we've recognized that one of the essential components of ending domestic and sexual violence is really looking at equity. And we've made it a programmatic priority across all of our grants. And, we're trying to improve outreach and services, prevention for survivors in historically marginalized and underserved communities, particularly those facing disproportionate rates of violence and having multiple barriers to services. So I know you have partners out there who are working in communities that may not have ever been able to access resources, right? So we encourage you to please bring them to the table and also find ways to partner with them, because it is all tied to a broader coordinated community response. And one of the hallmarks of the Violence Against Women's Act is the implementation of a coordinated community response. And I think most of you know what that is, ensuring that we have all the voices at the table. We know that collaboration enhances effectiveness. When agencies work in silos, critical information can be overlooked, or the needs of survivors can be overlooked. And that having a CCR is so important, and I'm actually glad that Mark Wynn is going to be speaking after me, because he's been an excellent, excellent partner in providing trainings on CCRs and the importance of it. And speaking of CCRs, one of the areas that I work on is the intersection of firearms and domestic violence. And this is an area where you need to have a very strong CCR. As you all know, when there is the presence of a firearm in a domestic violence situation, the lethality risk for a victim increases dramatically fivefold. It is the #1 killer of women. When you have an abuser with a gun, the rates of intimate partner homicides increases as drastically. It is also extremely dangerous for our law enforcement partners as well. That's a statistic that I know many of you are aware of. And then we know that there is a critical connection to mass violence. I'm actually based out of Texas. not too far down the road from me is Sutherland Springs. And I was working at the coalition at that time when I had to show up in Sutherland Springs to deal with a church being shot up by someone who was too dangerous to be even having access to a firearms. And so this work is not, it's not only professionally important, but also personally important as well for me. And there are so many federal and state laws that are out there, but we know it's not just laws that are on the books. How are we implementing them? How are we supporting local jurisdictions? How are we supporting law enforcement, prosecutors, and working with victim advocates to ensure that we don't have a situation where our victim winds up dead? So the CCR is so important here, and I'm glad to hear that New York has invested in ensuring that jurisdictions have the appropriate resources to for local jurisdictions to handle these issues. And with that, to support your work, I want to share that OVW funds a National Resource Center on Domestic Violence and Firearms. This is nationwide training and technical assistance that anyone can access, and that is our goal. We want to make sure that our training is accessible to as many people as possible. Additionally, right after the Supreme Court decision on Rahimi, where we upheld that, the common sense law that somebody who has a protective order, if they're subject to a protective order, they should not be having a firearm. So we're very thrilled that the Department of Justice actually was able to prevail in that particular case. Right afterwards, we released a resource guide for addressing the intersection of domestic violence and firearms. That's on our website. I encourage you to go there and take a look. It has a list of grants. Additionally, some information on how to engage with federal partners, such as the ATF, with your local U.S. attorney's offices, FBI, NICS, of course, with OVW. And there are some tremendous resources there that I encourage you to take a look at. And of course, you can always reach out to me as well, and I'll make sure Johanna and others have my contact information and information about these resources. And aside from CCRs and firearms, we have been investing a lot in trainings and building partnerships when it comes to supporting the investigation and prosecution of these crimes. And one of the resources we recently released was a framework for prosecutors to strengthen our national response to sexual assault and domestic violence. And this is essentially a guide for prosecutors on how to build provable cases and how to work with survivors in a trauma-informed manner. Because, again, you are the frontline folks. Survivors are most likely going to be engaged with you first, right? Or they might be engaged with someone outside of the criminal justice system, but most of the time they're going to connect with law enforcement or with prosecutors. That first interaction is going to determine how long they're going to continue to engage within the criminal justice system. So we hope that this particular resource will assist you in your work when it comes to the prosecution of these cases. And this particular guide is a complement to something that we had released back in 22. It was an updated guidance to improving law enforcement responses by reducing gender bias. And again, that particular resource is on our website. So I've just, essentially taken this time to share a little bit about what we do, what we can fund, what are some of our services. But none of this work can be accomplished without partnership with all of you who are on the ground doing this work every day. So I just want to take a moment and say thank you very much for the partnership, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director Fan, for your remarks and also for your amazing commitment and support of law enforcement and prosecutors and the community on this important issue. I'm now thrilled to have the honor to introduce Mark Wynn to continue our conversation on the focus of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. I first saw Mark speak over 15 years ago and was blown away by his message. His commitment to the issue spans decades, beginning as a patrol officer in Nashville. He is recognized as a tireless advocate for victims and has trained law enforcement in all 50 states and in 10 countries. As some have said, victims are safer and we are more enlightened due to his work. Thank you very much, Mark, for being here. I'll turn it over to him now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you for the Department of Criminal Justice Services for inviting me here. I am so fortunate to have been in your state many times before, and I have trained officers and troopers and deputies from Plattsburgh to Auburn, from Niagara Falls to New York City. So you've always treated me right at home, and I always feel at home when I come here to New York. And a big hello from Nashville. Have you been? Oh, good, good. I hope everybody treats you right. We're proud of our city. We make a little music in Nashville. I don't. I can play jukebox. That's about it. But we're proud of our city. And we practice, Old South charm and New South progress. And when you come, you get to hear a little music and eat some of our new hot chicken we're serving nowadays. So I've been on a long journey, and I want to tell you about this journey a little bit. And one of those great moments of my long, long journey in this work was here in New York. And I came up here about 25 years ago. Matter of fact, Judge Kay, y'all remember Judge Judith Kay? Any of you remember Judge Kay? What a great judge she was. And she brought me up to Rye to do a training for the winter conference for the judges. We had about 2,000 judges in this big conference center. So we sat down the night before and went over our message. She wanted me to talk to these judges about exposure. What exposure does to children. They hear, they witness the emotion, they see the aftermath, they intervene, they're involved in that power dynamic, they're blamed for the violence, they witness the assaults, and they're forced to watch all the horrible things that happen. They suffer direct physical violence. So she wanted me to tell the judges that, but as we're getting ready to go in this big conference room, I'm standing at the back, the back entrance, and there's about 4 or 5 judges with us, and she looked up at these other judges, and she says, "Lock them in." And I said, What? Lock who in? She says, "I'm going to lock the doors of this conference room, and we're not letting any of them out till they hear every word you have to say." So when the judge locks you in, you know how that goes. You can't, there's no early release, so you have to actually follow the rules. So that was one of my first experiences with your state. But I've got something else I want to share with you. I've been working on a documentary with 2 filmmakers from New York City, and we just finished it. And I've been using it with police trainings and other events around the country. I want to show you a little clip because I want you to maybe use this in your work after today. So let's take a look at this. It's something to run away with nothing but the clothes on your back. We did, in a big hurry.
I'm going to introduce you to retired Lieutenant Mark Wynn.
My mother, this man married when I was about 5, and then he beat my mother. He beat my mother to 2 miscarriages.
This is it. Still standing after all these years. Yeah, I can see people moving in my mind. The police. You see him. I wish they could see me. When I got into policing, that's when I started to see the real problems.
It's the most committed and least reported crime in America.
Do you all have a standalone, complete, comprehensive policy on how to do? I see you shaking your head already back there. You don't? If you got friction, you got misunderstandings, work on it today, get it out of the way, start working together. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to save a life.
I had never heard a man talk about these issues the way that you do.
How did you not grow up to have those impulses towards women?
I'd like to go knock on the door and say, hey, how you doing, old man?
All the things that I watched you do to me, my brother, my sisters, my mother, I've used that to train officers on how to catch people just like you. So these 2 filmmakers, Ann Demar and Kirsten Kelly down in New York, approached me. I was doing training in Virginia. They said, we'd like to come and watch you train because I've got to train cops everywhere. And they were at the training. They said, we want to film this. And I said, for what? And they said, we want to show what it looks like when men are in the business of stopping violence against women. And I said, well, I can't turn that down. Because I'm the 5th of 6 generations of police officers in my family. Typical Irish family, couldn't find real work, so we got into policing. We just kept doing it for about 100 years, so in my family. And in my experience, though, I lived in violence with a violent stepfather for 10 years as a child, and then now 47 years in policing. So that's about 57 years of talking about this topic around the country, around the world, and time, creeps up on you, as they say. We experienced everything that my good friend Ellen Pence, some of you know who that is, she included all these behaviors in her power and control wheel she created in 1984. And that was 2 years after I started training at our academy in Nashville with our young coplings. And in all those years, I tried my very best to explain to police officers the realities and the perceptions of victims, because when you stand behind the door as a child and stand on the other side, it's a different thing. You really appreciate the fears of it all. Now, I'll give you a quick example of this, talking about victims' perceptions. I was a SWAT officer for 15 years on our department, and you all know what SWAT teams do. We spent most of our time with domestic, barricaded, hostage, suicide situations. We had a woman one night, her husband had held her hostage, neighbors called in, said he had a gun to her head. We got there, quietly sort of evacuated the neighbors. We lit the house up. We called in, negotiators called in, and she answered the phone. She said, I didn't call the police. I don't need you here. Leave me alone. Go away. Well, hell, we knew what was going on. He was standing right beside her, right? So we were persistent, and finally he got on the phone. Negotiators talked him out, which is most often what happens, right? But before that happened, she appeared at the front door of this house. Now, when you're in these kind of situations, you have to be prepared for, release and escape and execution, all that stuff that you do. And the door closed behind her, and he was nowhere in sight. So we started yelling, ma'am, run to our voice, we're the Nashville police. And she looked at us and turned and walked back inside the house again. We thought, what the hell is this? So we resolved it. He surrendered, and we debriefed her at the end of this. And we asked her, said, ma'am, thank God you're safe. We're glad to see you here. But we have to ask you, did you hear us yelling at you? She said, yeah, I heard you. I knew you were the police. And we said, could you tell us about your decision to go back inside this house? She said, I've been through this before. And we told her, we said, man, we've never responded here before. And she said, I know you hadn't, because I've made sure you've never responded here before. Now, this is the victim, right? We said, can you explain that? She said, look, I've learned, this is her words verbatim, she says, I've learned how to negotiate for my own release. So there you got a hostage/hostage negotiator all wrapped up into one, right? And she said, here's how I've done it. He puts that gun to my head, and I don't go to the shelter. I don't call the police. I don't go to my mother's. I don't take the kids. I don't get a protective order. Those are my bargaining chips to stay alive, right? And then she said, there's been moments, though, where that didn't work, and I submit, and he rapes me. So we're kind of speechless listening to this woman. And then she said, my problem's not really my husband. And we said, who's your problem? She said, you are. Now, we just rescued her. She said, you're my problem. We said, what do you mean? She says, I knew how to survive without you. I didn't know how to survive with you. Now, this is a perception that we have to understand about victims and the price they pay when they call the police. It's heavy. I know that price myself. I know it. And over the years, officers in classrooms have asked me about male victims. And after all these years, we know the percentages of male and female offenders. We got that worked out pretty well. There is a number, though, that we've never really counted, and this is where I want to appeal to you today. And I believe those numbers are in the millions. Millions of men like me who survived, but so many of those survivors as adults locked it away and never returned to it. And I'm not asking you to walk back into your trauma. I know it's not easy to do that. It's hard. But around 1981, 82, I had an opportunity to train my command staff, my chiefs, and they didn't know me all that well. They hired me, but they didn't know me all that well. And I told them about my own experience growing up in a home filled with violence. Matter of fact, I told them that I tried to kill my stepfather when I was 7 years old. And you should have seen the chief's face. He looked over at the deputy chief and said, who's doing our background investigations? They didn't know. They wondered who they'd hired on this police department. And I gave this whole long story about survival of 10 years, standing at death's door. And after I finished, the class left, and the deputy and the chief, two deputies and the chief walked up to the podium and shook my hand and said, thank you, Mark. That's our story. That was my chief. He said, that's our story. And I thanked them. I felt like that felt really pretty good to me because somebody other than the woman, a man, is telling me they're a survivor. But I really wish they had done it when the whole class was in session so they could hear it all. It takes courage to do this, and I think we're on our way. I've seen more and more of this. I've got a good friend at Chicago PD. I've been training Chicago officers probably 35 years now, and I've trained in all 22 of their precincts. It's a fine agency with a hard job in Chicago. But the citizens in Chicago were battling, with their cops all the time. And we brought this film to Chicago, and we showed it, and I asked my friends over at the PD, I said, if you got somebody you can introduce me who's a survivor like me, and I got to meet Gino Garcia, really great guy, young officer. He came to the event, and we showed the film, and I'm watching the crowd, the citizens listen to this issue around domestic violence, and I said, I want to introduce you to one of your officers, Gino Garcia. He works for you every day. This man risks his life for you every day. He knocks on the doors of people he doesn't know, and he risks his life. I want you to see who's working for you in uniform. And Gino told the crowd, when I was 5, my father killed my mother. And I found her body, and I tried to revive her, and I was covered in blood. I ran down the street, and I was 5 years old, barefoot. Chicago PD officers found him running down the street, brought him back to the house, and found the body, and they prosecuted his father for murder. And he said, my mother was a Chicago police officer. He's now wearing her badge. It's a tradition. You fall in line, you hold the badge for the next generation. And I watched the crowd that day in Chicago look at their police department a little bit different because the survivors are in uniform too, just like Gino and just like me. And they're out there every day talking about this issue so that they can stop the next assault, the next rape, the next murder, just like women survivors do and have done for years. You heard Linda talk about the 30th anniversary of the enactment of violence against women. And by the way, you heard all the wonderful things that it does, and it does all that. It's increased funding for battered women's shelters and transitional housing and family justice centers and training of police. It's, to me, because I've done so much work for them over the years, it's about keeping cops alive. The first officer we lost in the line of duty in Nashville, Tennessee, killed by an offender in 1875, was killed by a DV offender. Why haven't we made this connection before? I think the first officer you lost in New York was down in the city. It's like 1811. Why are we talking about this? Because officer safety is victim safety. I don't separate the two. I never have and I never will. But the Violence Against Women Act has transformed our country. There's no question about that. Yet, despite all those changes that have come about this great work we've done, we're still treading water, folks, on domestic and sexual violence, and it's time for a change. So I'm here to appeal to you again. Some claim that domestic violence is generally perceived as a woman's issue. Women have taught us a lot about survival, as I gave you the example of the hostage. Many believe that if women could only learn how to behave a little better in relationships, they'd fare better at home. Y'all heard these myths about domestic violence. And I'm here to tell you that domestic violence is definitely not just a woman's issue. It's, of course, a human rights issue. And the only way we're going to make changes needed to make our homes safe is for everyone, and that includes men, to stand up and work alongside women to stop this violence in our homes. Now, let me tell you again about my journey, and I want to give I could go all day, but I don't have the time, but I just want to tell you what my journey has looked like for me in all these years. Living in fear is an interesting thing as a child, and it eventually brought me to law enforcement. I got into law enforcement because of this. I remember one night when I was standing on the front porch of our house in Dallas when a big Dallas officer, which my brother later worked for Dallas, and my nephew. And he stepped on the front porch, and I was behind my mother. I was about 5 years old, and I had my arm wrapped in her leg, and I was scared to death. But my stepfather, who was not a cop, but all the other men in my family were police. So I thought, well, here we go. The cops are going to help, And the first thing this big police officer said in Dallas was, if I come back out here one more time, everybody's going to jail. And my mother's body just started rattling. I was holding on to her leg. And it's one thing for a child, for a parent to hold a trembling child. It's a whole other thing for a child to hold a trembling parent. And I knew right then, on that front porch in South Dallas, what I was going to do with my life. It was a long journey, and I just barely made it. But for the grace of God, is what I often say. It brought me to law enforcement, and it helped me make meaning of what it felt like to stand on that front porch, and then what it felt like then to knock on that door as a police officer years later and see women who looked like my mother and see children who looked like me when I responded. So I've had some really incredible moments as a police officer, and it helped me understand the negative and positive impacts. We don't think much about, we all like to think about the positive impacts on police presence, but there's a negative impact as well, and we have to appreciate that. What it feels like to have a cop in your house at 1 a.m. and yelling and screaming and people in fear of their life. That experience, by the way, helped me build the largest domestic violence investigative unit in U.S. history in Nashville in 1985 with 40 personnel working nothing but domestic and sexual violence cases. It helped me start a transitional housing program with my wife in Nashville that's now in place, has worked with over 10,000 victims, and it's helped me in my city to help me build. I'm not the only one. The city did this. It was a joint effort. The largest family justice center in the United States is in Nashville, Tennessee. So when you come to see us, I'll get you a tour. Let me know. But let me tell you about real quick. I just have to tell you what happened that was so pivotal to me and my brother. I watched him beat my mother into miscarriage. I watched him throw her out of speeding cars. There are survivors in this room. You know what I'm talking about. You've lived it like me. And we watched the police walk away. And I'm not blaming police. You have to consider time and context. I got that. This is my family. My father policed in the 40s and 60s, and he was a judge for 35 years. So I don't blame them. They didn't know. Nobody understood. There were no laws. There were no policies. There was nothing there for anybody. But we were trapped, and we were Tennesseans that were moved to Texas as children, and my stepfather was an alcoholic crop duster, which was an amazing thing. It's a dangerous job in the world, and he flew drunk all the time. But it got so bad that my brother and I decided to kill him. And we decided, he was 12, I was 7, so we decided to kill him. We thought, well, we'll stab him to death. So we planned it. We thought he'd pass out one day, and while he's in bed, we'd kill him. And then we were ready to go, And my brother, very smart, he said, no, look, the Dallas police hit him in the head with these sticks, and it doesn't hurt him. And he was a police fighter. So stabbing him will just piss him off. So we had to figure out another way to kill him. When you're killing people, you got to get it right. So we snuck into his bedroom. He had a big bottle of Mad Dog. I'm not sure whether that translates here or not. Y'all know? Yeah. I'm going to get sued by Mogan David, I think, if I keep talking about this. So we skinned this bottle off the nightstand, emptied it out, and we filled it up full of Black Flag bug spray to the top. put it back on his nightstand. An hour later, he comes in the living room. He sits down. He's kicking it back, drank every drop of it. Never blinked, never threw up, never rolled over. And I remember the commercial at the time of a big roach that rolled over on his back with his legs in the air. And I was just imagining he'd roll over, and I turned to my brother. He's sitting about 10 feet from us. I said, when's he going to die? I know he hurt us. And my brother said, I don't know. And I said, if he's not going to die, I'm going to go outside and play, right? Get up in the morning, eat breakfast, carry your stepdad, go out and play. And I think it's funny, too. I can't laugh about it now, but let me tell you what would not have been funny. If this man had died, then something else would have happened to us. Dallas police would have arrested us. We'd have been charged with, premeditated murder. My brother and I would have been put in a holding cell with a bunch of young adults. We'd more likely been beaten or raped. And I wouldn't be in Albany. I'd be in Huntsville, Texas today. I would have been an outlaw. I don't doubt that one bit. But, but for the grace of God, we managed to get out, and we survived it. And since then, I've told people about this story, and I've had other people walk up, as I said, and say that's my story as well. The home was filled with violence. Now, this is really important, I think, for all of us to understand. The home filled with violence is the wellspring for most of tomorrow's crime. But the next generation of abusers is not inevitable. It doesn't have to happen. Fortunately, with my family, we had a strong mother who protected us and eventually got us to safety, but before the impact of violence left the wrong impression on my mind. But unfortunately, our situation is not unique. Millions of children, male and female, have grown up or growing up in homes where their mother, their aunt, their grandmother, their sister are victimized by a family member. And you don't really appreciate or understand male privilege until it punches you in the face. Violence and male privilege are the heartbeats of domestic and sexual violence. We as men have got to start talking about our privilege and how it runs this crime day in and day out. Victims often stand by feeling powerless, burying their feelings and memories deep inside. Or like me and my brother, who grew up vowing to do something about it. We both got into law enforcement. And too many young boys who grew up in homes where they witness violence don't know what to do with those feelings. We've got to find another language. We've got to find another way to talk to them about how they feel. Because if we don't, they'll often turn into the next generation of abusers. Your young officers in this room today, 30 years from now, will be dealing with domestic violence offenders one more time. And at the same time, young girls grow up to be victimized one more time. But not all follow that path, and not all are destined to be domestic and sexual violence offenders or victims because they experienced it, they learned from it. Most don't go on to become offenders. I'm always been a 90-10er. I think 90% of the crime is committed by 10% of the population. So I'm not preaching doom and gloom here for you, but there's something else that can happen with those folks who survive it, the men who get out. There's something else they can do. I know this is a big ask. I know how hard it is to share these moments. But in my many years in law enforcement and police training, I've interacted with hundreds of thousands of advocates, community volunteers, judges, cops, doing a great job, and you're in this room today too. And I want to say this to the officers here. I've lost 4 friends killed in the line of duty responding to domestic violence calls. And it helps you focus, folks, when you stand over the body of an officer. You throw away all the excuses. You try to think, what is it that we can do to keep our officers alive? What can we do to keep our community alive? And I will never forget them. You don't get into policing because you want to drive fast and you get free coffee. There's something else to it. After about a week, you know what you're into. And it's a noble, noble, noble profession. But we've got some work to do as male officers as well. And I've seen policies and legislative changes that made it easier for us to hold offenders accountable. I've worked on pilot projects across the country and done analysis of police departments in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Chicago and San Antonio and Richmond and New Orleans and Albuquerque, all over the country. I've been so lucky, I'm just a hick from Tennessee, but they let me in the door and I give them my 2 cents worth. But I think we've got some work to do here, and that's outside of our police stations. Overwhelmingly the individuals who I interact with in this capacity are women. I mean, the very first time that I taught a class at Hendon, that's the Metropolitan Police in London, this is probably 86 or 87, and I stepped in the class and they were all women constables, and I asked the director of training, I said, where are you men? And he said, well, this is women's work. And I thought, well, okay, that's your opinion of it. That's not my opinion, but let me tell you, that's the reality. Most often when you walk into a conference that talks about domestic sexual violence, women are running it. We've got to change that, folks. And over the last few months, as I've accompanied this film around the country, I've been humbled by the number of men who have come up to me and said, I'm a survivor. I had a prosecutor in Kankakee raised his hand and said, I'm a survivor. I saw Mitt Gino, Paris, Texas lieutenant stood up in a conference with a bunch of men and said, I'm here to tell you that I'm a survivor too, and I used it when I got into policing. That's what I want to hear. I want other men to talk about their stories. So many young boys like me that grew up in silence, never sharing their experience with anyone, not finding their way and bringing meaning to what happened to them. This is the thing I think we have to process. What does it mean? What was the meaning of it? What was the reason for it? And I've come to believe these men can make a big difference. I really do believe that. They don't need to talk about it if they want to. I understand that as well. And I know how men are about talking about painful things. You know how we are. We don't talk about our feelings. But it's when these men realize that they have that power to bring meaning to the past, to make a positive change for children, that's when we'll stop treading water on domestic and sexual violence. It's when these good men step forward and join with other men like me and men in this room to do something significant to help make theirs and other families safe is when we'll stop treading water. It's when these men and the men in this room volunteer to help raise money for domestic violence shelters, to hold other men accountable when they make misogynistic comments and jokes about women, to teach their sons to respect women and girls, to model healthy relationships, to assess the policies and practices in your workplace, in your police department, in your hospital, in your school, to make sure that the workplace is not hostile to women. You all know, folks, we still only have 13 to 14% of women in policing. This is a problem we have to fix. I've trained in Canada very often. The Canadians are almost at 30%. The Australians are at 30%. When you talk to young women about getting into our profession, they often say the workplace is hostile to women. We've got to fix that. We've got to talk about that. We've got to look at our policies, encourage women in policing. We have to make sure that when we enact a policy that it has knowledge to it, is sensitive about the crimes and its impact on survivors. It's when men realize that ending domestic and sexual violence and creating safe homes is not just a woman's issue, but it's their story as well. That's when we'll stop treading water, and that's when we'll see a real change in our country. Thank you so very much for what you do. God bless you. Please be safe. And I look forward to seeing you again back in the great state of New York. Thank you, folks.
All right, good afternoon. We're going to continue moving along with our keynote speakers. My name is Mark Heller. I'm Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Crime Analysis and Strategic Partnerships at DCJS. And as we kick off the symposium, I do have the honor and pleasure of introducing our next speaker. Assistant Commissioner Elizabeth Dates from the Suffolk County Police Department has been a true leader and a partner in developing and expanding what is our 10th Crime Analysis Center down in Suffolk County. As you can see in her bio on the app, Liz brings her wide-ranging experience in organizational change management and policy development to that department as they embrace data-driven and evidence-based modeling of the Crime Analysis Center network here in New York. So obviously nothing is without growing pains and challenges, especially around organizational buy-in and those types of areas. Liz has been a true ambassador for the CAC principles, as well as those of GIVE, SNUG, ATI, and so many other DCJS-supported programs and initiatives. So I'm going to make it quick, brief. Please join me welcoming Assistant Commissioner Dates.
Good afternoon. Mark, thanks so much for that kind introduction. This whole event this week is designed around idea generation and the opportunity to learn from one another. What a blessing to learn from Lieutenant Mark Wynn and his personal story of survivorship. Can we please give him another round of applause? I'm going to use the next 30 minutes to help us take the technical lessons that we'll learn over the next few days and take them back to our home agencies to lead their implementation. I'm going to talk a little bit about transformational leadership and managing change today, the process of progress, and the best way that I could think to do that is to talk a little bit about the transformations that I've been a part of and that have transformed me too. I grew up on Long Island, and I know what you're thinking, 2 delightfully soothing accents in a row. I come from a family of public servants, and my late parents continue to inspire me every day. Show of hands, who played sports in high school? Lots of us, okay. I decided to try out for track in high school. And as I was coming off the starting block, I fell face first into the gravel, face plant, skid, opened my eyes to see the entire football team cracking up laughing. And I tell you that because at that time, I had no knowledge or information, essentially no clue about how to come off a starting block running track, and I tried to do it anyway. One of our greatest challenges in law enforcement is getting the right policy, training, and information to our officers in a timely fashion so that every day they have skill, speed, and purpose coming off the starting block. Teamwork, or the fancier term, strategic partnerships, and information management achieved through the deployment of technology are the foundation for the framework that I rely on to manage organizational change. And if we can build teams that get these right, we're setting our officers and our communities up for success. Clear, consistent, concise policy aligned with training, evidence-based strategies to prevent crime and reduce disorder, data-driven measures of compliance and measures of success, meaning are we doing the thing right and is it making a difference? Individual and organizational interventions to continuously improve performance, and a robust and transparent disciplinary process which comes last for a reason. This framework applies at the department level, but it also applies anytime we shape new initiatives that we hope will improve the quality of our law enforcement service delivery. This is the starting block. I'll keep coming back to this framework as sort of an organizing principle, and I'll keep coming back to the starting block because it wasn't my only face plant. So let's go back in time to when I started my legal career, which was surprisingly a lot like that first time I ran track. My first trial was a federal civil rights case, and not long into the trial, I opted to take no position on a legal issue. For those of you who've been party to a lawsuit, not sure how you'd feel if your own lawyer took no position on your defense, probably like the judge who leaned in and told me that that was in fact the dumbest thing he has ever heard in his entire time on the bench. So I look over at the court reporter and she's cracking up laughing as she's transcribing my embarrassment, and I looked behind me to see my dad sitting next to the reporter from the Associated Press and the New York Post. So I kept that transcript on the inside of my office door for quite a while, kind of a reminder that things could not get much worse. So trying cases, which I swear I eventually got better at, taught me 2 things. First, that part of our job will always entail countering false assumptions. You never really get to start from scratch. And second, that all cops are human. So I want to start with this idea of preconceived notions or false assumptions, which especially the analysts in the room deal with all the time. I tried a shooting case once. When this incident happened, news reports read that NYPD officers had shot a young black man who was face down on the sidewalk, point blank in the back, killing him. And importantly, all of that was true. Can you tell me, was that use of force objectively reasonable? Was it justified? Or is there some information missing? The missing information in that case was that the young man who was face down on the sidewalk had a 9mm high point in the mouth of the lieutenant that he was fighting with. The lieutenant yanked the slide out of battery so hard that he pulled the ligament right off his own thumb. And when the lieutenant turned his head and yelled, "Shoot him, shoot him," another officer fired one shot, stopping the threat. Being able to convey that additional piece of information to a jury that the decedent was armed and actively trying to shoot the lieutenant in the head at the time that he was shot and killed overcame the false assumptions and resulted in a verdict in favor of our officers. Now, this particular tragedy began with a young man carrying a gun who was unafraid to use it. And it's one of the many reasons why we in Suffolk County believe in the GIVE program's comprehensive approach to reducing firearm-related violent crime. Now for that second lesson about police being human. After winning the trial, an officer pulled me aside and he told me that after that shooting, he went to confession. He was afraid to tell me that sooner because he didn't want his very human response to trauma to compromise his livelihood. So these were the two lessons that I carry with me, that we're often up against false assumptions or misleading facts that we need to overcome with information that is both reliable and actionable, whether by juries or by our officers. And we can't ever forget that cops are human beings first. A finding of justification does not necessarily erase the pain of taking a life. I think about this case as well whenever I evaluate our use of force policy and training, and this is where that first element of our transformational framework comes in. Is the policy clear, consistent, concise, and is our training aligned with the policy? Is it operational or is it theoretical? There's no room for uncertainty with lives on the line. As New Yorkers, which I think most of us are, we probably all have some experience with natural disasters. In 2012, Superstorm Sandy hit the South Shore of Long Island, where I lived not far outside the city. A friend and I brought some toiletries over to the firehouse where our volunteer firefighters were living and working around the clock, many having lost their own homes in the storm. Do any of you remember the first time that you were able to provide help to somebody when they needed it? It's much different from lawyering, which is generally pretty retrospective. I look at Sandy as my first time working with a team at the point of execution, where I used my legal education and my process orientation to collect, organize, and deliver resources, including information to the residents of my community. We went door to door to let our residents know that the sewage treatment plant had gone offline and that the floodwaters were actually contaminated with 200 million gallons of partially treated and raw sewage. Delivering that information kept people safe. That entire experience and our local first responders, including my EMT dad, inspired me to join the NYPD. So in my first law enforcement job, fresh off my time litigating cases, I implemented a strategy that drove down lawsuits and taxpayer-funded settlements and improved the quality of law enforcement service delivery. The mission of the Police Action Litigation Section, or PALS, is to create conditions where good faith law enforcement is not dictated by the fear of getting sued, meaning that our cops can't be so afraid of getting jammed up or losing their savings to a lawsuit that they don't get out of the car and proactively police. We rarely acknowledge that our officers' justifiable concerns about their reputations, promotions, pensions can prevent cops from getting out of the patrol car. Disengagement or depolicing is a public safety threat, and it has little remedy other than for us as leaders to do more to motivate our officers to stay engaged with the public and to reduce their risk however we can. The starting point for transforming the city's approach to police action litigation to reduce risk was to craft a narrative about the adverse impacts of settlements. Every word matters. We refuse to call them police misconduct cases because that term presupposes misconduct.
Kind of like the shooting case I talked about earlier, false assumptions can carry a lot of weight. So we coined the term police action cases because the only assumption that we were willing to start with was that the police took some action that was being challenged in court. It was neutral. We also had a plan. We forecasted staffing and budget, developed policy, process, and training, identified data-driven measures of performance and measures of success. The next step was gaining buy-in. Then Police Commissioner Bill Bratton led with, you guys probably know this phrase too, cops count, police matter. You hear him say it all the time. He was serious about supporting his workforce and their families, and equally serious about addressing the epidemic of depolicing, especially in the aftermath of the killing of Eric Garner. But even with a strong narrative, a solid plan, and the support of leadership, change required a catalyst. When New York City rewarded a man who had threatened an officer with a machete with a $5,000 settlement, outrage came from a broad and pretty unusual coalition. The police commissioner, police unions, newspaper editorials, and even then Mayor Bill de Blasio, who condemned the deal that was struck by his own law department. The settlement and the ensuing debate helped drive a new aggressive approach by the city in dealing with roughly 3,000 lawsuits annually filed against the police. It seemed to outsiders like this was sudden, this move to improve the quality of investigations into claims against our officers, that we immediately were able to start using litigation data to identify patterns and trends, to amend policy and training, and to design individual interventions for officers whose patterns of behavior raised concerns. While the machete settlement was the catalyst that highlighted for key decision makers that this was a problem that we had to fix, the plan to fix it was already in place. And the moral of that story is that you don't need authority to start planning for change. You are more likely to get to yes if you are briefing a plan than if you're just briefing an idea. Building a team, by the way, is a key element of transformational leadership. Our team in PALS consisted of seasoned and junior lawyers, sworn officers, experts in electronic evidence, and we had to build new strategic partnerships with other city agencies like the law department and the comptroller. Cross-functional teams are the best at delivering change efficiently and at scale. Getting the right people on the team bus is probably one of the most important leadership lessons that I've learned, and honestly, it's still one of the hardest things to do, especially in government. The information that was generated, analyzed, and delivered by PALS led to more informed decisions, which drove down our litigation volume by over 50% and reduced payouts by over $100 million. I hope you're starting to see the nexus here with the work done by our New York State Crime Analysis Centers, one of our most important strategic partnerships. Both PALS and the CACs are about building teams to transform the way that we gather, analyze, and deliver information, which leads to more informed and higher quality policing. As the NYPD's Director of Civil Matters, I was selected to attend the Police Management Institute, where I began my formal study of executive leadership in law enforcement, and I know we have some fellow PMI alum in the room here today. There, I learned that leading means assuming the risk that comes with making difficult organizational decisions fairly quickly and almost always on less than 100% of the relevant information. I tell cops all the time, even today, that you assume a high level of risk by joining this profession. My job is to make decisions, absorb some of your risk, and make your job user-friendly without minimizing your positive impact. And that takes a lot of learning, especially for someone like me who's never been assigned to patrol. So I continue to seek out opportunities, not just like PMI, but like this symposium, to learn from people like Lieutenant Mark Wynn, Dr. Cassia Alio-Ray, Dr. Jerry Ratcliffe, Dr. Mitch Javidi, so that I can better serve our sworn workforce. I included this picture, by the way, because my PMI class is still a team, people that I could reach out to at any time who are subject matter experts in all the things about policing that I don't know. 2 years after graduating from PMI, I was selected to serve as a White House Fellow. The White House Fellowship is a nonpartisan leader development program that dates back to the Lyndon Johnson administration. The unofficial motto of my fellowship cohort is that democracy is not a spectator sport. You all, as drivers of public safety and stewards of tax dollars, know that better than anyone. My first assignment in the Office of Chief of Staff to the President of the United States was to hand out M&Ms and name tags at a conference on artificial intelligence in government. So I figured, I've got this, right? I'm a police executive, I have a law degree, I can do M&Ms and name tags. So the conference was interesting, but I literally knew nothing about AI, and at the time, I didn't even know blockchain was math. At the end of the day, the Deputy Chief of Staff asked me to pick the pilot initiatives that I wanted to work to scale across the federal government. So I leaned in on 2 projects for exactly the same reason. One used artificial intelligence to map fire and flood lines and deliver real-time information to first responders. AI for humanitarian assistance and disaster response. What sold me on this project was the story of the Granite Mountain hotshots, when 19 firefighters died fighting the Yarnell Hill fire in Arizona that was with information that was more than 24 hours old. Predictive fire line mapping was slow and manual, and the lack of information contributed to the deaths of 19 first responders. The second project was a pilot that used AI to streamline the code of federal regulations. The CFR imposes fines and civil consequences for people and entities who don't follow government regulations. AI figured out that the CFR still used terms like triplicate and Pony Express and had 3 different definitions of ice cream, making the body of regulations literally impossible to follow. So what's the analogy in law enforcement, right? The first box in our transformational framework. Are our policies clear and consistent, concise? Can our officers actually comply with all of them simultaneously? Are they able to be operationalized, or are they stuck in the ivory tower of headquarters? So the idea of eliminating conflicting provisions and modernizing requirements using AI to make regulation more carrot than stick appealed to me. Both projects spoke to my personal belief that the primary responsibility of government is to save lives and tax dollars. The Hatter pilot also took me right back to the heroes in my hometown who braved the sewage-filled floodwaters to rescue people during Sandy, not knowing where the flood line would go or if it was already too late. A few months later, I had been on a solid run of briefing my boss, the Deputy Chief of Staff, and he previously served as CFO of Microsoft and chair of General Motors, and he was just like a super tough, super serious boss. So I was about to host an executive conference on artificial intelligence for Hatter, Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Response, and it was kind of like this room here today. It was a broad coalition of entities with relevant missions, DoD, Energy, Interior, Homeland, the private sector, Microsoft, Amazon, FirstNet, OpenAI, and more, to gain buy-in, build a team, and generate momentum to develop applications that would improve the impact mitigation of natural disasters. We aim to go from the manual mapping of fire lines to the delivery of information in real time, which I'm going to keep coming back to save lives, property, and tax dollars, and to catalyze American investment in emerging technologies. As I briefed my boss, he interrupted me, and he asked me a single pretty pointed question. He goes, "Liz, how much will this cost?" And I thought I had the right answer. But the reality is, I gave him how much it should cost, not how much it would cost if it was run by the government. So his response, he looks at me and he says, "You are orders of magnitude off. Bring me someone smart to talk about this." And I didn't know if I should laugh or cry or hide under the table. It was just one of those moments where I was so mortified, I was kind of paralyzed by it. And I just thought of myself skidding on the gravel, coming off the starting block again. I opted to get up and grab the smartest person I knew to come in and answer the question, and I was supremely grateful that there was no court reporter. I've told that story quite a few times over the last 4 years, and like others, you might be thinking like, wow, that guy, what a jerk. I quickly learned, though, that my boss's response was driven by his respect for American taxpayer dollars. The whole project was about people dying when we failed to generate reliable information in a timely manner, And I was sitting there missing a critical piece of information. My boss recognized that it was preventing him from making a good decision within a reasonable risk tolerance on behalf of the entire federal government. I was missing the right information and couldn't deliver it to the right person at the right time, and there are simply no higher stakes than people's lives and livelihoods. That's why I'm so passionate about the CAC mission, which most of you are familiar with, and I know you're going to learn more about tomorrow in room 1 at 1 p.m. Our CAC leaders and staff share the same sense of urgency around delivering actionable and reliable information to our officers to save lives and to spend tax dollars in the most efficient and effective way. 1 week after that briefing, I hosted the executive forum in the Indian Treaty Room on the White House campus, and at the end, I gave senior leaders from across the public and private sector a course of action that would create a consortium before my fellowship ended. The U.S. Department of Energy and Microsoft later announced the creation of the First Five Consortium. The consortium is named in acknowledgement of how critical the first 5 minutes are in recognizing the type and scale of a disaster or hazardous incident, activating the appropriate response system, and managing the event. How fast can we come off the starting block? In disaster mitigation, just like in fighting crime and reducing disorder, time is the ultimate catalyst. We must always operate with a sense of urgency. Halfway through my time at the White House, the COVID-19 pandemic took hold. I had gotten some really great advice before about moving to the friction, identifying problems and being the guy to devote time and effort to driving solutions. I obviously was not a doctor, and I wasn't sure how I could contribute, but I showed up on a Saturday morning in the West Wing and listened as the federal government task organized for COVID. I specifically was tasked with coming up with a system to route and offers of help that were made to senior leaders across the federal government. This was a very different type of transformation. There was no time to plan, get buy-in, or brief senior people. This was like straight to the catalyst, go. This project gave me the great fortune of being the person to action the first whiskey distillery's request for FDA approval to convert to the production of hand sanitizer, the request by Brooks Brothers to convert their garment factories to manufacture PPE, and to say yes to FedEx's offer to ship tests around the country at no cost to the government. This, too, is a story of information management and crisis decision-making, routing, vetting, and accepting offers to minimize bureaucratic delay and maximize taxpayer access to critical resources. I'm sure you all remember this period of time as well as I do. And while I was working on COVID, I was watching the news back home with both protests and riots unfolding in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. On TV, I saw my team out in the field, my own lieutenant on the front page of the paper with blood running down his face, and I wanted to go home to what I perceived to be the friction. I truly believed that I could do more and have a greater impact in the streets of New York City than I was having in the White House during a global pandemic. On Friday morning in late May of 2020, I walked to work thinking about whether I would leave the fellowship. When I settled into my office, the phone rang and I was asked to come to a meeting in the Roosevelt Room across the hall from the Oval Office. This was not usual, by the way, like this was so crazy that I was called into this meeting, so I run over to the Roosevelt Room and I take a seat in the back with my notebook ready to take notes. And I was invited up to the table where I sat down with my boss, as well as the Domestic Policy Council, the Attorney General of the United States, White House counsel, and the President's Chief of Staff. They asked me about their idea to issue an executive order that they hoped would support law enforcement but satisfy the throngs of protesters seeking seismic changes in policing. So I am so busy writing down in my notebook, Liz, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this because I can't believe this is happening, that I almost did not realize that the Attorney General was sitting there actually waiting for my thoughts. So he was waiting for the unique insight that I brought to the table as a subject matter expert who happened to be serving as a White House fellow at the time. And everyone in this room has that. You have unique insight. Having confidence in the value of your insight and experience is the foundation of transformational leadership. In short, when you are given the opportunity, be bold. So by happenstance, I'm sitting feet from the Oval Office. I have 14 years of experience working with cops who we know from the shooting case many years before are human beings first. So I give my thoughts to the Attorney General. I said, "Sir, that is a terrible idea." The conversation sort of stopped, and he pushed me to explain myself. I wondered out loud if there was any data or if there was any research to support the policy change that they were advocating. Would it inform law enforcement behavior in a way that was positive? Would it have a positive impact on public safety? What are we going to do if the impact is negative? This was not data-driven, evidence-based policing. It was simply an idea. So I said, there's a question we're always going to ask. Will this change keep an officer from getting out of the car? As I said earlier in regard to the mission of PALS, and I said to Jared Kushner, who later shared this story in his book about his time at the White House, there is no law that compels a police officer to get out of the car to address crime or disorder. I told the room they are human. You are human. They proactively police out of the selfless desire to protect their communities, and it requires incredible courage. If we create confusion about policy and eliminate legal defenses, officers are not getting out of the car, and our communities will in turn be less safe. The idea was scrapped, and the information and insight that I provided allowed us to redefine the problem, assess risk, and craft a more effective solution. Sometimes preventing a negative transformation is as important for a leader as fostering a positive transformation. As a leader, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, unsure if anyone is going to be on your side. And that moment could have gone much worse, and maybe next time it will, but I won't be unwilling to speak up if there is a chance that my input can help police officers and save lives and tax dollars. Within the next few days, our leadership team at the White House pivoted to an executive order that increased incentives for departments to seek accreditation through CALEA or NILEAP, addressing the real problem, which was a lack of functional police excellence that required immediate investment and support, not another move toward defunding and depolicing under the guise of police reform. So in June of 2020, I stood in the Rose Garden as the President of the United States signed the executive order, Safe Policing for Safe Communities, and there's a copy hanging on the wall of my office in Suffolk County. At the White House, I got to work with a lot of different stakeholders to gather a high volume of information, identify complex problems, find common ground, and build consensus solutions. Learning transformational leadership at the highest levels of the federal government was an incredible honor, and it really set me up for success in the position that I'm in now. In March of 22, I was honored to assume the role of Assistant Police Commissioner for the Suffolk County Police Department. I pledged to help our department become the most innovative, efficient, effective, and equitable law enforcement agency in the country. In preparing to serve as a senior leader in one of the state's largest law enforcement agencies, I reflected on my leadership philosophy, my experiences as a trial lawyer, the local heroes that I got to work with after Sandy, transforming the city's approach to police action litigation, and to the many lessons I learned at the White House. I am a relentless optimist. I aim for perfection, and sometimes I will settle for excellence. I try to be agile in my thinking, and I make decisions that are informed by subject matter experts of every rank and role, by all of you in this room. I own the decisions and the risk that comes with making them, but we also are unafraid to pivot to a different course of action if the measures of success aren't where we want them to be. I try and balance agility with stability, and most importantly, define information as value and recognize the importance of collecting high-quality data and getting our cops more information from our crime analysis centers and getting it to them more quickly to help keep them safe and keep the public safe. When I arrived at SCPD in March of 22, I was thrilled to learn that my team was like way ahead of me in defining a vision for the future of information management. We actually had 4 transformative technology programs beginning at exactly the same time: a new records management system, a shared CAD across a consortium of agencies on the East End, the county-wide implementation of a new personnel system to manage time and leave for our entire workforce, and the development and implementation of the body camera program. By the way, my worst fear about antiquated systems that lag behind our real lives is that they may eventually discourage doing the police work in the first place. Are they getting out of the car if the administrative burden is 20 or 30 minutes of data entry after 5 minutes of police work? Much like I wondered if they would get out of the car if they kept getting sued, or if they'd get out of the car with a change in force standard or the elimination of civil defenses, I worry the same thing about the ever-increasing clerical burden of police work. I'm afraid the answer will eventually be, no, I'm not getting out of the car. In addition to efficiency, each of our systems have to be designed for adoption. Our policies, procedures, forms, and training have to align with new initiatives, but what about this idea of strategy? When you're leading a lot of big changes at once, it's helpful to task organize for purpose. And by that I mean develop a strategy that explains the ultimate objective, the process, and the players so it's easier to identify value to every individual stakeholder who has to make a decision or contribute resources to the effort. This is especially necessary because, I don't know if you guys know this, but cops hate change, and cops also hate when things stay the same. But progress is impossible without change. To make progress prior to chaos, we actually have to invest in obsoleting things that are working just to stay ahead of the crime curve. So Henry Ford was certain that the Model T car was the right car for all time. Anytime people complain to me about why our systems and technologies keep changing, I ask them if they are still driving a Model T. And they are not. So you could probably tell by now that I love a good slide, and special thanks to Assistant Deputy Commissioner Drew Biondo for the support with the slides. I want to share with you the information management strategy that we're executing against at SCPD. It's a high-level visualization that explains the transformative work going on across the department. Inputs on the left, process in the center, products next, purpose on the right. And this strategy supports what may be the most important part of our framework: the consistent application of evidence-based crime reduction strategies. I am excited for all of you to hear more about our SCPD evidence-based policing journey tomorrow morning at 9:30 in room 2, when 2 of our precinct inspectors present with George Mason University's Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy. You can also hear more about our recent innovations in behavioral health on Thursday at 4 p.m. in room 6. Together, we asked, how do you generate business intelligence? Use it to apply evidence-based policing strategies to reduce crime and disorder, and then measure the effectiveness of those strategies. Imagine 5 minutes of police work, less than 5 minutes of admin work, and our CAC receives, analyzes, and deploys enough reliable information in close to real time to enhance the quality of decision-making in the field, and then confirm that it's actually working, improving officer safety and public safety. This nexus between the CAC and evidence-based policing for us is inexorable. And that is the secret that I hope you have all figured out by now. I am here because you, the CAC leads, analysts, intel guys, FIOs, you are the partners that are delivering the business intelligence. You are achieving your partner department's goals of getting the right people, the right information at the right time so that they can make the best possible decisions. What do I contribute to these efforts? First, I try to unlock strategic initiatives from the IT silo. Cross-functional teams generally deliver better results, and a law enforcement agency that creates cross-functional teams of cops, lawyers, policy experts, trainers, strategists, technologists, probably the budget guy, will ultimately do much better at executing against our transformational framework than if you just leave change to your IT department. Technology itself must continue to be part of a broader strategy, not a goal. We can't buy programs or products. We have to decide how to create data with ease, facilitate analysis, and deliver decision-ready information. One of the most transformative initiatives that I'm involved in is the work that we've done over the last year to scale our Suffolk County Crime Analysis Center. I am so grateful to Tom Cummings for the first conversation we had about why the SCAC lived in parallel to similar assets, performed work that was valuable but sort of isolated, and how we might have an opportunity to form a more strategic partnership, not just with DCJS, but with other local agencies with public safety missions in Suffolk County. Once we identified that complex problem, we looked at policy process training, measures of performance, measures of effectiveness, our entire framework, and we put together a proposal to senior leaders. And I could say now that it was actually a series of proposals. If you were making a pitch, study the professor, not the test. The county budget officer, DPW, the ledge, the chief of department, the DA, the sheriff, all of our values are aligned, but our missions are slightly different. And sometimes you have to take different pathways to get to yes from different people. What happens after you get to yes? Build a cross-functional team who could work efficiently and effectively and simultaneously. Be relentless. Schedule weekly stand-up meetings. Send email after email. Set performance expectations for everyone around you. Identify barriers, knowing that you must remove them, and refuse to turn back. Our team knows better than to ask me for a due date because my answer is always yesterday. We have a sense of urgency in this profession because we have the authority to take lives and liberties away from people. That same sense of urgency translates to our strategic partnerships. We're leading our most impactful work with a super high level of communication and transparency because change otherwise breeds anxiety and increases risk, and we cannot afford that in this profession. In the case of our CAC, we had to execute an MOU with our partners in the state, submit a resolution to the local legislature, relocate 6 commands within our headquarters building, start construction, amend our organizational chart, wind down legacy programs, amend workflows, train and retrain our staff, build our team, and then start integrating our other programs, including SNUG, GIVE, and our smart policing partnership with George Mason. The key ingredient to that entire process is transformational leadership. The success of our CAC is due to Inspector Matt McCormick working under Acting Police Commissioner Rob Waring and Director Tom Cummings working under DCJS Deputy Commissioner Mark Heller. Absent their leadership, ability to build teams, and I have to stop and highlight their inclusivity, build teams including their civilian analysts, absent their ability to solve complex problems and their relentless desire for forward progress, we would not be where we are here today. And the same is true of the receivers of information generated by the CAC, the doers of evidence-based policing, Inspectors John Sumwalt and Brendan Forte. My best advice to you all is that no matter what projects you're taking on or how insurmountable they may seem, find leaders like Tom, Matt, John, and Brendan who can drive others to execute against a comprehensive, fast-moving plan that requires a whole team with a shared sense of urgency. To sum up these lessons, seek out problems to solve, move to the friction, gather as much information as you can, develop a narrative, counter the false assumptions, build a team with strong leaders, brief the plan to get to yes, identify your catalyst, take care of your people, and go. Lead by example. It was almost 25 years ago that I face planted off the starting block in high school track. What I didn't mention is that 18 months ago, inspired by our chief of patrol, I completed my first half marathon. We all face plant, and we will likely do it more than once personally, a few times professionally, and occasionally organizationally, especially in times of change. The process of progress is about having the right leadership, policies, procedures, training, performance metrics in place to ensure that our technology supports rather than hinders the work of our cops. It's about setting clear expectations and creating conditions for excellence before we blame our officers for getting it wrong. And it is a little bit more about agility and resiliency, the ability to make incremental progress over time, even in the face of setbacks, without losing sight of our long-term goals. That is true whether you're on the starting block for the first time or you're halfway through a marathon. Thank you so much to Commissioner Rosado and the team at DCJS for inviting me here to speak, and to all of you for listening. I am beyond excited to learn with you and from you over the next few days, and I hope we all have a phenomenal symposium. Thank you.